Hello guys. So I want to quickly talk through the answers for classwork 4 on visual representations of data. I hope that you have already tried this on your own after watching both parts of the chapter 4 lesson. So this first one is asking you to make a frequency distribution for this set of values here. Here, remember that your frequency distribution may look slightly different than this. First step is to set up two different columns, one that's labeled class intervals, the other is frequencies. A frequency distribution has a whole bunch of different ranges of values under class intervals, and then the number of times that those values occur in the data set in the frequency column. So frequencies think how frequently do those values appear. Key things as you're doing this is to make sure that each of the class intervals has the same range, right? So they need to have the same number of values. 0 to 9 is 10 values. You're counting both 0 and 9. 10 to 19 is 10 values, right? 20 to 29 is 10 values. So you shouldn't go something like 0 to 9 and then 10 to 25, right? That they should all, the class intervals need to be equal. And you should always have your lowest values at the bottom, your greatest values at the top. And if you are trying to figure out how many rows to have, a helpful tip is to calculate the range and then divide the range by the number of rows you want. So here our range is our highest value is 99 minus our lowest value is 2. That gives us a range of 97. If you said you want about 10 rows and you divide 97 by 10, that gives you 9.7. Round that up to 10, that tells you that if you do it each class interval of around 10 values, you're going to get about 10 rows. The goal here is that you shouldn't just have like 3 or 4 rows, but something that's showing the spread of the data. So after you create all of your class intervals, then you're going through and just counting up the frequencies. So how many values in this data set are between 0 and 9? 1, 2, 3, 4 values are between 0 and 9. How many are between 10 and 19? 1, 2, 3 are between 10 and 19. So that goes here. You count them up for all of them. Again, it's okay if you use different ranges. Just make sure that all ranges are equal, all class intervals are equal, and that your lowest values are at the bottom, your greatest values are at the top, and you're appropriately counting up the frequencies for each category. Number 2 then is saying using the frequency distribution, draw a histogram by hand. Again, these don't need to be perfect. I'm having you do them by hand just so you understand when we look at the frequency polygons on paper and in Excel, we know where the frequency polygon comes from, and that the frequency polygon comes from a histogram. So here we're just creating along the x-axis at the bottom the different ranges you used, the different class intervals from your frequency distribution, and then the tally, the number of times that each one occurred. So 0 to 9, we had a frequency of 4. The 10 to 19 had a frequency of 3. And if I was really being, nitpicky and drawing in every little thing that I would do 0 to 9 and then write in a little 10 here and do 10 to 19, write in a little 20 here. I care more about that you're getting the idea of where a histogram comes from and how it's developed, more than I care by writing in the parts of the graph exactly right. But so that this is the histogram that comes from the frequency distribution. Okay, and then thinking about if we were to draw, we know that the different frequency polygons or shapes of the different curves come from drawing lines across the histogram. So if we were looking at different frequency polygons, which are the lines that could be drawn across histograms, what are some of the different shapes of data and what do we call them? So this first one is a negative skew, right? Anytime the values are all lumped to the right at the higher end, that's a negative skew, compared to, in contrast, down here, this one is our positive skew. Anytime there's a peak of or a higher number of low values than high values, that's a positive skew. This one here is platykurtic. So anything that's compared to a normal curve, more flat, remember think plateau or platypus tail as ways to remember platykurtic. The flat, more flat one spread out with greater variability is called platykurtic, compared to the one that's a tall peak with a skinny peak that all of the values or most of the values cluster in close to the mean in the middle. That's called leptokurtic. And then of course the one that looks like the bell-shaped curve, that's called our normal curve. 4 asks you to explain what type of chart would be appropriate and why. So this first one is saying the number of applicants to 4 different universities. Here we're comparing frequencies, right? We're comparing the number for different categories. The number for different categories, if we're doing that, then a bar chart would be appropriate. You would not necessarily want to use a pie chart because we're not talking about anything related to percentages of a whole, right? What doesn't matter is what percent go to one university or apply to one university compared to another, but rather how do the frequencies vary up and down for the different universities. So that's why bar would be appropriate. Remember, anytime there's language in the question about the number or the frequency or the count among different categories, that's the language that should tip you off that a bar chart or a column chart is appropriate. Remember, bar and column are essentially the same thing. It just varies for which direction the bars go. B is saying the proportion of freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors at LaSalle. Anytime you hear the word proportion or percentages, that should trigger in your mind that a pie chart is appropriate, right? We want to see what is the breakdown of the different categories out of the whole, right? Out of a whole pie. So anytime we're comparing proportions of a whole, that's pie. Then C is the change in amount of money made from first year out of college to 10 years out of college. So this is change over time, right? What's the change in the amount of money from 1 year to 10 years later? Anything that it says about change over time, that's when a line chart or a line graph is appropriate. 5 then, now we're switching to doing some of the visual representations in Excel. So this one is using our class survey data and asks you to create a histogram for amount of money spent on a night out. Again, lots of different things that you could do here. Get creative playing around with some of the styles, but that the kind of general idea or a review of what to click through for this. To create a histogram in Excel, you first select the column for the data that you want to use, go to Insert, Charts, and then this one kind of in the middle here that says Insert Statistics Chart. Click on Histogram and it automatically inputs it there for you. Notice that the bins or the ranges or the class intervals here are a little different than what I have in my answer sheet. To me, doing a range for money of like 0 to 45 is kind of weird, right? That seems like a weird range, 0 to 45. Maybe 0 to 20 and 20 to 40 might seem like a more reasonable range. So remember, if you click on the values at the bottom here, it shows that it's the automatic category is selected, but if you click on bin width, you can change this to whatever you want. So it could be ranges for $20 or ranges for every $50, right? You could do that however you want. And then the only other thing that's important is to make sure that you're giving your chart a title. If you double click on the chart, this allows you to change the title so that you're saying where the data came from and what the variable name is as well. And then to get fun and play around with the designs, you can click this paintbrush and explore some of these ones here, or they're also up here in the top toolbar under chart styles as well. So that's histogram. 6 is asking you, using the Gallup poll data, pick any variable to create a pie chart. So I chose the one in the Gallup poll that is the very last one on asking people as of 2010, what do we think we should be doing to lower the crime rate. Should we be attacking the social and economic problems that lead to crime, or should we be adding more law enforcement? So remember, to create a pie chart, you are selecting the data that you want. So click on the top left part of the data, hold down the shift key. While holding down the shift key, press the over arrow and then the down arrow as long as you need to have all of the necessary data highlighted. And then just like for the histogram, click insert, go over to pie chart, and then either the 2D pie or the 3D pie, whichever you want to use. You can play around with the different styles if you like having the percentages on the pie chart, which I think is helpful. And then again, being able to change the chart title here. One helpful tip too is that sometimes it can be a little tricky when you're going to copy and paste something out of Excel into Word. Make sure that you're clicking to copy and paste, not on the actual pie chart itself, but on some of this blank space will enable you to copy and paste it more easily. You can also just directly copy and paste it, which will change the format a little bit if you're changing the size of it. Or if you want it just to stay exactly as it is as a picture, then you can be moving around the size and nothing in the format will change. So that's a helpful tip perhaps. Right, and so then there's your final pie chart. Then the last question is asking you to create a bar chart using the death penalty data. So I chose to, again, use the last one on type of executions, but from 1980 to 1999. Again, you need to select the data that you want. So start with the top left, hold down the shift key, press the over button, and then down until all data are selected. Release the shift key, then click insert, and this one in the top left here is your column or bar chart. So I chose for this one the 3D column. You could have also done a bar like this. Lots of different stylistic options to play around with. Mostly what I'm looking for, of course, is that you have something that you can read that it's appropriate bar or column, and that you have the appropriate title that says the type of data as well as where the data came from. Okay, so I think that's it. If you have more questions on the classwork assignment or the chapter 4 material, send me an email. I'm happy to give you extra practice problems if you want on any of them. And if not, then you should be ready to do the homework. All right, that's it, guys. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.